Hello and welcome back to another episode of Solo No More. I'm your host, Catryce Thompson. And let me just tell you, this is going to be a little bit of a wild ride of an episode. I had a discussion with some of my clients recently who are photographers, and they were talking to me about another photography business coach. And they asked me if I knew this person, and I didn't. I hadn't ever heard of them. And they were like, we would just love and it was interesting because there were two of them who were just kind of like, we would love to kind of get some feedback on some of the things that are being shared by this coach and just kind of get your thoughts. And oh my God. And like at first I was like, okay, like cool. Like, everyone has different approaches to business and they, like everyone has different approaches to business. And I want to hear, like how are they doing things and like, maybe I'll learn something. I was very open to this. And then they started kind of rattling off things and I was like, whoa, what? What the fuck? That's actually kind of crazy. And so I have notes on my phone of the things that were said by this coach that I'm going to pull up really quickly so that I can reference it. But it was just very interesting to me because again, like there isn't a wrong or a right way to approach business, but at the same time there also is. And I found that there were some things that were being shared that I was like, yeah, I totally like resonate with those. I align with that. Amazing. But then there were other things where I was like, that's actually really insane. And that actually contradicts some of the things that I share and the things that I believe. And so I was like, you know what? I am going to put this all into a podcast episode and then I'll probably turn these into some carousels, post them on captured media because I just think that there is so much nuance. And it was really interesting because I asked if there was reasoning, what was the deeper reasoning behind some of these statements? Did my clients know that? And then they said no. And so these are just blanket statements that were made. And then also just kind of hearing about their experience. I'm always really interested to see and experience, but also hear about, different people's like their sales strategy, how they approach sales and stuff. So again, this is going to be wild. It's going to be interesting. But just bear with me. So I'm kind of like, there were things I'm going to talk about kind of the things that I like aligned with. Like there was things about, using your gear to justify your pricing. And I totally understand that. I was having this conversation with my clients and I was like, okay, like imagine, and they also resonated with this. This wasn't really a question, but we were kind of just talking through some of these different things. And as we were talking about using gear to justify your pricing, like, yes, when we are determining our rates, we are taking into consideration our bills, our equipment that we're using. We're taking into consideration like rest and relaxation, like, building in buffers and stuff, because ultimately we don't want to be jam packing the goal is to be able to live life and run a thriving business. The goal is not to just have this thriving business that requires us to be working all the time. I was actually having a conversation with another photographer recently about this, about how they increase their prices, but they're taking on less weddings and how much relief they feel in being able to spend more time focusing on the clients that they do have and a bunch of stuff. But going on, again, gear and that stuff is factored into pricing. But how crazy would it be for me to say, I charge $297 a month for Evergreen Support Network because it costs X amount of dollars for my iPad? That would just sound really weird. And it's also like sometimes when I see people, justifying their pricing with their gear, I almost want to ask them, when did you buy that? Because I bought my iPad, which is now like dead. I need to get a new iPad like 3 years ago. But if I was using that to justify my pricing right now and I've raised my prices and all these different things, that would be weird. And that wouldn't really fit into alignment. A little thing. Another thing that I agreed with was the idea of like not bashing your couples or their guests. And like that's really big in terms of like just etiquette and professionalism. And there's definitely a time and space to be like, whoa, like red flags, here's what I learned. And there's ways to be really intentional about discussing different things, but yeah, like we shouldn't be bashing. But here are the things that my clients were like, okay, what are your thoughts, Catryce? Because we don't know how we feel, and now we're a little bit confused. And so these are some things that that this coach said that you shouldn't be posting or using in your marketing if you want to be a booked out photographer. One of those was like, you shouldn't be posting time spent editing or time spent in your editing cave. There's so much nuance to this. And again, I asked and I was like, okay, but why, like, why does she believe that? And one, they didn't know. And two, they didn't know because there wasn't more context given. But two, they also said that one of them was like, I was considering reaching out to her, but I didn't know, I felt kind of uncomfortable kind of pushing back and that stuff. But when it comes to your time editing and your editing cave, like as a photographer, that's part of the job. And when we are posting to stories specifically, I'm going to talk about stories because I feel like that's where I see a lot of photographers posting about, editing in general. You're kind of just posting in the moment what's happening in life. And I find that I've heard from my friends who aren't anywhere near the photography industry the way that I am, that it is exciting for them when they see that their photographer is, editing and they can see that the gallery that they're working on is theirs. Like that's exciting. And there's so many different things like you can talk about like your editing queue, and that gives like a little bit of an update to your clients. Like they're then checking your stories and being like, ooh, I wonder like where I am on the list and those types of things. You can talk about, you could blur out the image of your laptop or your desktop or whatever that you're editing on, and you can be like, currently in my editing cave, like tap here if you want sneak peeks of this gallery. You can build that excitement, that curiosity. You can also build connections. A lot of photographers I see have go-to snacks for editing. They have, background shows that they're binging or movies that they're watching, and those are different talking points that you can use for connection, because yes, we want to be actively promoting and selling our offers as business owners. Like that's such an essential part of running a business, is like actually showing up and selling, because if you aren't selling and no one's booking and no one's buying, then you're not making any money, and do you have a business at that point? But connection and relationships is such a big part of having a successful, sustainable business. Something that my clients and I were talking about is relationship dynamics between me and them, and kind of bringing into kind of the experience that they've had with this coach, where this coach is really pushy and really intense in the DMs when she is one-on-one with people, it seems, based off of the experience. And again, this is just from two of my clients, that I'm not speaking for everyone, but they were like, she's really intense, and it's, let's get on a call, let's get on a call, let's get on a call, like join my broadcast channel, like, did you see that I'm running this free training, I'm running this free training, I'm running this free training. And it's not just like that being on the stories. Like it's one thing if that's on stories and you're like selling right there. It's another thing to be getting into someone's DMs and doing that. But it's like one of them sent me screenshots and was like, Catryce, look at these messages. Like, what are your thoughts and everything? And I was like, well, those just seem really cold, and like she just cares about the sale. And as we were talking about this, I was talking about like this editing cave thing, and I was like, this is why posting things like your editing cave and be like, what's your go-to background show? I'm watching blank. Or have you watched the recent season of, I don't know, like right now it's like The Summer I Turned Pretty. Those build connections and relationships, and that builds trust. That is so big for having a successful business, and for having like drawing in clients that feel aligned and connected to you. So there's that. Another thing that was said is that you shouldn't, if you want a booked out photography business, you shouldn't be talking about loving to travel for your work. Like if you want to be a destination photographer. And I was like, that's such a load of bullshit. If you love what you do and you love traveling to do what you do, talk about it. because for instance, let's say if I was a photographer, I'm not a photographer, but if I was only ever posting about Seattle and I was only ever talking about Seattle and I never talked about traveling and I never talked about, you know, pairing travel with, photography, if I was a photographer, people would probably be like, oh, she's just local to Seattle. I would only book her if I was in Seattle. Oh, I'm not in Seattle. I'm not going to book her, or I'm not around Seattle. But let's say that I got booked for an elopement in the Salt Flats in Utah. And I was like, holy shit, that was so cool. I absolutely love this. This was amazing. This was such a cool experience. More people are going to be like, oh, she likes to travel for work. Maybe she'd want to travel to take photos of me. Being excited and loving what you do is not a bad thing, and sharing that lets your, I was having this conversation with Reese, and I was, after my clients had talked to me about this, and I was talking to Reese and I was kind of debriefing, and I was just like, there's just so much to unpack here with like all of this. And when I was talking to Reese about it, I was like, when you talk about what you love, like what you love to do, and that like you're passionate about what you're doing, that makes me feel like you're invested, I'm more invested, and you care about more than just the paycheck. If you get what I mean, like when you love what you do and you can show that and people see that, they're like, yeah, like people can tell when you're just in it for the money. And that there is an energetics to marketing, and energy is exchanged, and people can feel when that's all you care about. And if you're not talking about the fact that you love to travel, and that's if you want to be a destination photographer and you want to be traveling and you aren't talking about loving it, why would anyone book you for that? Because they're going to be like, oh, like, I don't know if she actually really does like that. And like, to even piggyback off of the travel, she said that in your marketing, you shouldn't be saying, and I quote, book me in blank bucket list destination for a free session, end of quote. Now, I'm someone who will always tell my clients that you need to be charging your worth, and obviously that is so nuanced, and we go through like a full pricing strategy, and there's everything built into that, and we're pricing so then one, they have a sustainable, profitable business. But yeah, like obviously I tell my clients that, but I also tell them that if there is an opportunity, if you are wanting to break into a new, like a different niche, if you are wanting to get into destination, like it's okay to work for free sometimes. Like I even work for free sometimes when I love the clients, or I love, like, it's an opportunity where I'm like, okay, sure, you're going to pay for my travel. Fantastic. I get a free trip out of it. And something that I was telling my clients when we were having this discussion is like, what is really cool about the opportunities that come from making a post like that is, let's say, someone books you and they just pay for your flights, your lodging, your transportation. Like for me, they booked me for Vegas. Great. Now I'm in Vegas. Maybe I had them cover 2 nights, but I paid out of pocket for myself like a couple more nights, but they're covering my flights and that stuff. I then can go and post and be like, I'm going to be in Vegas from this date to this date. Who wants to shoot? I have availability for shoots this time to this time while I'm in Vegas. Not only am I getting that original booking, and now I'm in Vegas and my travel is already paid for, but now I'm also getting paid on top of that. It's also like, because you love it, again, going back to this thing about being passionate about what you do. And sometimes, like, everyone loves to travel for work. Like, let's be so fucking for real. Even if you were working corporate, people love to travel for work. I remember when I was working my 9 to 5, people loved when there were conferences and stuff where they could travel. I looked forward to being able to travel for work. It was fun. It was exciting. The same still holds true when it comes to running my business. I love being in Seattle. I love being at home. I work best when I am home. But I do love being able to go and travel and explore and also get paid while doing it. Like, that's super exciting. And so I think this idea that like you shouldn't be posting that, and like, yes, at some point you need to think about having a sustainable business, and you can't be taking on a ton of free shoots if you want to be able to pay your bills. Because if you're only having your travel covered and you still got rent to pay, like, we got to pay the rent. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not going to kill you to take on a few shoots for free. If you want a free trip out of it, get that free trip. Get your bag, girl. And I also think that like it's not necessarily working for free. There's still some sort of exchange in terms of compensation and deliverables. And so I think there's like a need for reframing around that. And like I know so often there are so many people who are like anti pay for my, like, if you pay for my travel, I'll give you a free shoot or I'll shoot your wedding for free. But I do think that there is a time and place where you can do it. And you can do it more than once. Just, make sure that your business is set up for you to be able to continue making money. And so you're able to pay your bills at the end of the day. Like that's the bare minimum. Another thing that was said is to not share that you have been booked for a double header weekend. So where you're working 2 weddings, 2 elopements, an elopement and a wedding, where you're working multiple sessions of a sort in a weekend. And I thought that was really wild because I'm like, girl, get your bag. Be booked and busy. That's okay. And it's not a bad thing to be like, hey, this is what, like, weekend recap. I just shot 2 weddings. Who wants to see the sneak peeks? Why are we telling people that they can't post about that? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? If you want to do, like, how elopements, how cool would it be? Crazy, the thought that I just had. How cool would it be if you shot a sunrise elopement at Mount Rainier in Washington State Saturday morning, and then you shot a Vegas elopement on Sunday evening? How fucking epic would that be? That would be so cool. I would be locked in on your stories. I'd be like, holy fucking shit. Not only is she booked and busy, but she's booked, busy, and traveling. Crazy. Why is it bad? Like, why is it bad that people are booked? Why is it bad? Why? And I think that, and I had this, like, we dove a little bit deeper, my clients and I, on this, is like, whoever booked you first on that weekend, you want to make sure, and you don't have to have a conversation with the client, but, like, do a vibe check. And this is something that you can do during like a consult call, is really getting a vibe of like, are these people that will book more hours? Will they want the day after or day before? Things like, will that get added on? And if they aren't, you can fill that time up. Just because someone booked you for Saturday does not mean that they get the whole weekend. They're not paying for that. They are not paying for that. Do not hold space on your calendar for someone who is not paying for that space, that time, that energy, because there is energy going into it. You are planning around it. You are making sure that nothing conflicts with it. If they are not paying for that, the time is open. You can book other clients and you can share about it. You can share about it and it's okay. The last thing I'm going to talk about, outside of a couple things, the last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of the things that she said not to use for your marketing is not to say that you are almost booked out. That's crazy. So when we look at sales psychology, there is the idea, the concept, the principle of loss aversion. When someone feels like they are going to lose access to something, they are going to lose something, they are more likely to buy because they don't want to miss out. It's that urgency, that scarcity. Also, this idea, and when I was talking to Reese about this, Reese said this. He said, if you are never close to booking out, then you are always available and there is no sense of why should I book now? And yes, you can talk it up and be like, you should book now because of the cherry blossoms or the fall foliage or whatever. But that urgency, think about, I do this. When you're online shopping, how many times have you gone through, done some online shopping, gotten to checkout, gotten distracted, and you were like, there's not a sale going on. This is just normal shopping time. There's not a sale going on. And you just get distracted and you go to do something else and then you come back to it. and maybe you get distracted again. But when there's a sale, if you get distracted, you're like, okay, wait, I only have like one more day left. I need to get back to my freaking cart and check out. Like the loss aversion, that sense of urgency, the scarcity. If you are almost booked out, that's okay. You don't need to say yes to every inquiry that comes in. You do not need to make space in your schedule for every inquiry that comes in. It's okay to be almost booked out. It's even okay to be booked out. Those are both okay. I don't know why it's not okay to say that. Why are we saying it's okay to be almost booked out or booked out? And to talk about that and really, that sense of urgency and letting people know, like, it's first come, first serve. Like, get on my calendar now. My schedule is booking up. I only have X amount of dates left. I only have X amount of spots left. That makes a big deal, and that will help you sell. That is really good strategic marketing. Like, it's utilizing sales psychology, for God's sake. But no, having this discussion was really interesting because we were kind of talking through their experience with this coach, and honestly, I don't give a fuck that my clients are following other coaches and all that. I honestly love the dialogue that we have because sometimes they come back like with things like this and they're like, let's discuss this, let's break this down. I'm confused, I have some feelings about this, and we have amazing conversations. A 30-minute call turned into an hour-long call because of this, and it was so good. I felt like I was getting stuff out of it. They were getting stuff out of it. It was so good. And something that we ended up talking a lot about was our relationship dynamic and the way that I approach sales and the way that I approach my, how I, come alongside my clients. I am very much not someone who is like, oh, I'm going to talk down to you. I know better than you. I will always admit that, for instance, I'm not a photographer. I am really great at business. I worked in business operations. I've done marketing. I've done program development. I'm pretty freaking good at that. At 19 years old, built up a multi-six-figure swim lesson program. I can do that. I got the marketing. I've got the business ops. I can do that. Great. I'm not a photographer though. There are nuances that I don't fully understand in terms of their world, in terms of what it means to be a photographer. And just the conversations that we've had, and I even had some conversations not too long before I recorded this episode following, having this conversation is relationships, connection, caring about people outside of the paycheck. Yes, do I go into conversations being like, wow, I really hope they book? Hell yeah. But I also am very much I really hope that I'm able to give them something that's going to help them get closer to their goal. I'm not a gatekeeper. I couldn't gatekeep to save my life when it comes to my business. Just the strategies and things I just want to share because I want everyone to be successful. I believe the world is a better place with more women making more money, and my ideal clients are women. And so I'm having all these conversations with different women. I'm like, girl, I just want you to get your bag. I want you to be booked and busy. But, this coach wasn't able to take no when told no. She was pushy. Not being able to read the room when my clients is a new mom and being like, hey, can you hop on a call? Hey, can you hop on a call? Girly pop. She's trying to raise a baby and she's trying to adjust to this new chapter of life, this new season. She don't got time for a call. She don't got time for a one-on-one call. There are just so many things. And I've just been thinking about it a lot over the last couple of days. I've just been thinking about it. And I was like, I just need to record a podcast episode because it was just really insane. It was just really insane. It was really insane to kind of just hear what was being said and bonkers. They even told me that she said that you shouldn't be investing in branding and you shouldn't have a web designer design your website unless you make 6+ figures in your business. What? Hell no. Branding is one of the very first things that I had a brand designer, a web designer work on my brand and website the very first time that I launched a business. I'm a 5 times founder. My very first business, one of the very first things that I did, branding and website. Do I have websites right now? I don't know. At the time that I'm not quite sure when I will be posting this episode, but I'm working on it. I do have branding. I do think that branding is a lot more than just the visual elements. It was just crazy. It was bonkers. And I just had to talk about it. So thank you so much for listening. I will chat with you next